Okay, we're about to start.
Sure, here.
My name is Paul Ragusa. I'm the moderator for today's webcast. It's Biometric Technology Recognition on the Rise. I'm the editor at Security Systems News. This webcast is brought to you by SIA and Security Systems News, and it's sponsored by Princeton Identity and Safran Morpho. I'd like to first give a shout out to our sponsors. First, Princeton Identity develops innovative biometric solutions designed to verify and manage individuals' identities for a wide range of physical security and data access applications. The company's unique multimodal biometric solutions employ distinctive iris and facial recognition technologies which deliver the highest levels of accuracy and speed both indoors and outdoors. With proven installations around the world utilizing their technology, Princeton Identity offers system solutions for a diverse range of mainstream applications, including mobile access control, corporate, industrial, and secure workplaces, airports, critical infrastructure, public arenas, and border control. Using the company's unique technical expertise, developed through a long history of research and innovation at SRI International, Princeton Identity creates and integrates the world's fastest, most accurate, versatile, and non-intrusive identity solutions. The other sponsor is MorphoTrack, Safran Group. MorphoTrack, a U.S. subsidiary of company of Safran Identity and Security, provides multimodal biometric identity and security solutions to a broad array of markets, including law enforcement, government services, border control, and commercial security. The company's Biometric Access and Time Solutions division is the most trusted provider of biometric technology for access control and time and attendance, with a history of unrivaled performance in more industries and tougher environments than any other supplier. Its criminal justice and public security division serves over 1,000 federal, state, and local government agencies and commercial enterprises. With over 4 decades of experience as a leader in the field of biometrics, MorphoTrack and its parent company serve more than 450 government agencies in over 100 countries and strive to achieve excellence in delivering mission-critical biometric identification solutions to help make the world a safer place. Okay, and now let's get to our speakers. I'm very excited. We have Gary Jones, and he is Director of MorphoTrack Biometric Access and Time Solutions Business Unit, responsible for MorphoTrack's biometric terminal business in North America. For the past dozen years, Mr. Jones has specialized in the integration of the company's biometric technology into the physical and logical access control and time and attendance solutions. Among his achievements, Mr. Jones created one of the world's largest channels for distribution of biometric readers, including high security, large volume, and critical infrastructure environments such as mines, ports, construction, and government services. Our next speaker, Mark Clifton, is President and CEO of Princeton Identity, a world-class identity authentication product and solutions company. Princeton Identity spun out from SRI International and became an independent venture in 2016. Mr. Clifton was instrumental in forming the new company and leading the raising of funds from investors and the transition of the biometric business out of SRI. Prior to forming the new company, Mr. Clifton was president of the products and solutions business at SRI International and was responsible for overseeing new and existing products that evolved from SRI's R&D technology divisions. Okay, great. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Mark. If you want to start, Mark, it's great to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and good afternoon, everybody. Everybody dialed in because they want to talk about biometrics, but I'm not sure everybody realizes that we really are using biometrics today, every day. We use signatures on all the documents and things like that, and so your signature is really a biometric. It's unique to you, and it was originally used because, as you see the John Hancock there, very noteworthy signature, we had smaller populations in the world, and you could identify somebody with their signature because you typically knew the person and had a visual that went along with that signature. Obviously, with the growth of the world's population, the ability to recognize somebody with their signature became less and less popular or even capable to tie all that to a visual. So the world really created credentials, and we've been using credentials for a long, period of time. And they're fine. The problem is our technology's caught up to credentials, and they're easy to forge. They're easy to get fake IDs, and credentials aren't as secure as they used to be. So they're for sale. If you go on the dark web, you can buy just about anything you want, and those kinds of things are readily available. So I think the world's thinking maybe it's time to look back at the biometrics, and there's something that we could pull out of that. Just some of the
Mark,
basics.
did you want me to do a polling question here?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, let's do our first polling question.
Okay.
And we're going to start with this first one here. And the poll is currently in progress. I'm going to give everyone about 10-15 seconds to chime in here. All right, well, about 5 more seconds here. And we're going to close that out and share it. And we're going to let's do another poll question while we're here. All right. Okay, here comes our second one, and we'll give everybody some time to vote on this one. About 10 more seconds. All right, a couple more seconds here, and we're going to close this question out. And I'll share the answers here. And we're going to do one more question here. Let's get one more polling question. All right. All right, let's move on to the third question here. I am launching it now, and here we go. I'll give everyone some time to chime in. About 10 more seconds. All right, a few more seconds here, and I'm going to close this out. All right, and Mark, I'm going to let you take over again here.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone who participated in the poll, and Mark, you can continue. Thanks.
I don't see it.
Yeah, so you should have control, Mark, if you want to take over.
Yeah, I don't see it up. It's not up right now. All I see is the last questions still.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you see now?
No, I see there it is. Okay, over there.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page when they start to talk about biometrics. we kind of look at it as a pyramid. The bottom of the pyramid, as I mentioned before, credentials, a card, RFID, a PIN, a password. It's something you know, but it's something you could transfer very easy, or somebody could get hold of. The next level is to really start using biometrics. And the finger, face, and hands are really some of the most popular biometrics today. And they're moderately secure. They're moderately accurate. And again, depends on a lot of different factors on how you rank that. But at the top of the pyramid is really the iris. It really is a very accurate, very secure biometric. And your probability of unauthorized access using a single iris is about 1 in 1.2 million. And 2 irises, if you have that, it's in the trillions. It's like 1 in 1.4 trillion. That you'd have a unauthorized access. But again, there's a lot of reasons people haven't rushed right over to use iris. First, it's been hard to use. It's been expensive. It's been obtrusive. People have had fear of the iris, thinking that it was a retina scan or was going to damage their eyes or things like that. So there's been a lot of, I'd say, nervousness about using the iris. But again, from a security thing, it is a contactless. It's a protected biometric. It's actually stable from about age 3 on. Again, it has some very high utility factors if you can conquer the ease of use and the cost. So, okay, let's see. I don't seem to be able to change the slide right now.
Yeah, click on the screen.
I have.
There you go.
There we go. The consumers have really started to adopt biometrics. Previously, fingerprints had a criminal stigma to them. Today, that's not true. Everybody uses the fingerprint on the phone, and it's very easy to use. It adds a lot of value. It's inexpensive. It increases security. And if you can do multiple fingers, obviously it increases that even more. The consumers are really pushing the adoption because it's on the phones and things of that nature. So that has really driven industry to start to adopt fingerprint solutions. And I'm sure all you that are in the security industry have seen that the adoption of fingerprints in a lot of different devices has grown almost exponentially in the past 3 or 4 years. So you're starting to really see the security industry, a lot of other industries, adopt that as a biometric, and that's good. I mean, I think that's all good for everybody. So some of the recent trends in the mobile market, and I mentioned the mobile market because the mobile market's really starting to adopt other biometrics as well. At the beginning of 2016, there was about 200 phone models that had biometrics. At the end of 2016, there's 550 models that have a biometric sensor. So it's in 1 year, it's doubled just on in the phone area. By 2020, 100%, it's predicted that 100% of the phones will have a biometric sensor or multiple biometric sensors. So you're starting to see iris and face come on the scene as other options for the consumer. I mentioned the Samsung Note 7 because that was the first to globally introduce iris to the mobile market. And we'll play the video in just a second. We actually worked with Samsung for the past 3 years to get the iris technology and the form factors that they could use it on a phone. So obviously we've been able to get the cost down, and again you'll see the ease of use in just a second. It's very easy to use, about arm's length, and expect to see it in the future products. I think Samsung was very happy with it. Unfortunately, the Note 7 had other problems, the battery problem. So it didn't really take off because of that. But oops. Play the video?
I was getting to the video.
Okay. All right.
All right, here's the video.
Our systems are easy to use. Simply glance at a door, a phone, or an ATM, or a turnstile, and get real-time access, indoors
So I think everybody saw how fast that was, how fast it opened the phone. I think the ease of use, the speed, and the cost is now down in the iris area, and you're going to see a lot more systems with that. So we also provide walk-through systems, contactless systems that do multi-factor authentication. And with the world really pushing in the borders area, the high throughput systems, you're going to start to see more of that happening, where people walk through and use biometric scanners to achieve entry to a location. We're already deploying some things in the Middle East, so you're going to start seeing this on a regular basis as time goes on. I just recently went to the Consumer Electronics Show. I don't know how many people were there. But you're really starting to see the biometrics move into other markets, certainly automotive. You're starting to see that. There was one company that had the iris, actually an iris system on the rearview mirror. So you can see a lot of reasons that might be used to authenticate the driver, to start the car, you name it. There's a lot of different reasons that you might want it in your automobile. Internet of Things. You know, there's a big push at CES for the Internet of Things. Everything was smart, everything was connected, but there wasn't a lot of ways to identify the user in the Internet of Things. So imagine you had a biometric on your front door lock, and you wanted to, you went in your house. Wouldn't it be nice if all your Internet of Things future things could know that you were in the house, and they adjusted and personalized things appropriately for you? So those kind of things are happening as well. The other thing we saw was, you know, banking and healthcare. We're starting to see those markets really adopt the biometrics for employees and also for customers. My bank, Bank of America, recently introduced some of the new NCR ATMs, and lo and behold, they have the option for fingerprint sensor in there, as well as just using your phone. So you can identify on your phone, and then tap it to the ATM, or use your fingerprint directly on the ATM. So, you know, I predict that ease of use and the cost will drive adoption. And I also say that mobile, the adoption in the mobile space will drive adoption in the other spaces. And I think the fear factor, when it's every day, people are using it in an everyday way, the general public, the fear factor is going to go way down. So, so what did it do to all the other markets? You know, I think consumers are going to expect to see biometric solutions in all aspects of their life, at work, at the bank, at the doctor, at the gym, at the car, in the car, at their computers, passwords, maybe they'll go away in time, at the airport. Will your phone be the only thing that's used for all these applications? And I say it depends, because in certain environments, people may not trust the person's phone as being them and has it been authenticated. So there's some issues with just accepting that, but certainly people using their own phone for their own information and their own access on their phone will continue. But there still will be a lot of other applications that you see in the marketplace, and there'll be a lot of options. So what's happening now?
Actually, Mark, you want to do a couple more poll questions?
Sure.
I'll do the 2 more poll questions before you go on to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, let's start. All right. I just launched it, and everyone, we have some time to everyone vote. Give you about 10 more seconds here. And a couple more seconds, I'm going to close it out. And I'm going to share the results now. And we're going to do all right, we'll do one more question here. I'm going to launch it. And everyone can start voting now. Give you some time. All right, about 5 more seconds to get your votes in. All right, we're going to close it out. And I'm going to share the results. And
Okay.
all right, Mark, I'm going to give it back to you. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so what really, at least from what I've seen, we're starting to see certainly high security areas. Data centers have been using biometrics for years, but I'm starting to see a lot in the financial institution and the whole financial market. They're really starting to adopt biometrics. They really want to have frictionless transactions with the customer, and biometrics provide a way to really make that a frictionless, transaction. So they're really looking at it. And I'd say almost every major bank has something going on in biometrics today, which is kind of interesting. Manufacturing, we're seeing manufacturing facilities that require, employee identification, or they have security requirements or things like that. They're starting to deploy these things. Athletic facilities are certainly using them for different applications, mainly to protect the athletes and to give them a little more security. I talked about the financial markets. ATMs and point-of-sale devices, you're going to start to see more of the biometrics in these devices. I see where you may be using a card and a biometric, but you still are probably going to start to see more adoption of biometrics in that space. The healthcare space, they're really just starting to explore, but just an interesting fact, so patient identification. So I mentioned the dark web earlier, you can buy things out there, but it turns out that you can buy somebody's credit card number and their information for about $5, but if you want their health insurance information, you have to pay about $50. So there's a value put on the patient identification, the insurance information. What's going on are people are stealing the the insurance card information, and they're going to a doctor and they're getting services under someone else's insurance. And the FBI estimate that runs about $30 billion a year just in the United States of that amount of fraud. So it's a pretty big problem that's really probably underreported right now, but you're going to start seeing more of that. And with the HIPAA requirements, healthcare records, knowing who's actually accessing the records is becoming more important, as well as drug dispensing. So identifying the people other than just using cards is going to increase. But the healthcare industry is just starting to look at it, so I wouldn't say that's going to be there tomorrow, but in a few years I think they will be. Internationally, you're seeing a lot of it. India, I don't know if you're aware, but basically they have enrolled over 600 million people in their IRIS program, and they use it for entitlements. The government uses it for entitlements, where they go to villages where there's no documentation, whatever, and they're giving out food. They want to make sure they're giving out food to the right people, the right amount. In the UAE, I mentioned before, they've been using biometrics for a long time at borders and their immigration facilities, airports, and they're adding more as we go along. Singapore, we're seeing that there's a lot of activity right now at the airports and the borders there in Singapore, and they have some peculiar problems. About 500,000 people a day cross over from Malaysia to work in Singapore, and they don't feel like they do proper vetting right now of all those people. And you imagine trying to move 500,000 people across your border every day and knowing who they are. Schiphol Airport's looking at a bunch of things in the biometrics area. So we're seeing a lot of activity. I think some of the leading airports are really jumping in and starting to add biometrics. So what's the future hold? The way we see it, imagine you're just looking to open your phone, open the door to your house, access your office, turn on your TV, customized to you, access your bank account, pay your bills, start your car, access your computer, you name it. You don't have to carry anything to actually do that anymore, just using your own biometrics. So in the past, when you said convenience and you said security, they were opposing requirements. Today, they're complementary requirements. You can have convenience yet high security And that's really the breakthrough that I think that's really happened with biometrics. Making it convenient, yet it's highly secure. Low friction interaction, meaning it's easy to use, and I think that's going to happen. Again, convenient yet secure transactions. You'll be able to do a lot of transactions on your phone, and the banks will accept your biometric as a pretty high surety that you're the person that owns that account. So I see that growing quite a bit. And ultimately, no more passwords or PINs. That's my goal. All right, and that's it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, Gary, before we start your presentation, I was going to do another polling question.
Sure, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, everyone. I'm going to launch the question now, everyone. I'll give you some time. Everyone start voting. About 10 more seconds, everyone. Get your vote in. All right, a few more seconds to close this out and share it. And all right, Gary, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, and good day to everybody. Thank you very much for joining. So before we get started, just to give a quick overview, what I'll be talking about today is a specific area of growth in biometrics. And in particular, we'll look at the application of frictionless fingerprint technology in biometric security. So before jumping in there, a bit of background. The use of fingerprints has been very, very prevalent for more than 4 decades, particularly in the digital space. And in particular, the largest users of biometrics, particularly fingerprint biometrics, are the law enforcement and government agencies that have been relying on the technology for essentially life and death applications for over 40 years. So the technology is, at this point in time, very well established, but it's also a biometric modality which is very highly proven and trusted. So what we'll be talking about today is essentially a natural evolution of that, taking the same concept and the same principles from a traditional contact-based application or use case to one which is contactless and also falls into this framework of what we call frictionless access or frictionless security. And whilst Mark mentioned earlier some of the shortcomings of some of the weaker consumer-type biometric solutions, what we always suggest is referencing major performance benchmarks such as the ones published regularly by NIST on nist.gov. These benchmarks are done on all major vendors' algorithms and are a great resource and a reference for anybody wanting to deploy a biometric system, because it gives you a good place to go and compare all the different modalities and also to compare the different performances of solutions that are out there in the market. And
Gary,
as an example,
do you have control? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I do indeed. Perfect.
All right, great. Sorry.
Thank you. So when it comes to performance benchmarking and testing, the fingerprint market specifically has evolved to a point where when you look at professional grade systems today in an operational setting in real world applications, good strong technologies are easily able to attain false acceptance rates of 10-5 or 10-6 or better, meaning 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million false acceptance rate or better. So that's where where the industry is today, and we'll talk about how that can be achieved in the upcoming slides. So traditionally, multi-factor security is something that everyone has been striving for, and really what it means is combining 3 different elements, something that you have, a card or a fob, it could even be your phone, something that you know, could be a PIN or a password, and then of course something that you are physically, being your biometric. And ideally, we'd like to be able to fuse all of these elements together for every transaction, every security transaction. But doing that, especially in the past, has implied that there's a certain delay factor that gets incurred when you do this. And particularly if you have to stop to present some kind of token or enter a PIN or even to touch a sensor, that's been seen as perhaps a bit of a constraint that maybe has meant that not everybody has been willing to adopt this kind of approach. And the same applies just for biometrics on its own. But in the real world today, more and more it's becoming critical to balance the need for security and convenience with throughput as well. So the question is, what's next, and what is the industry doing to try to address these needs? So before we answer that particular question, let's look very briefly. Mark mentioned earlier some of the drivers behind what's changing the landscape of biometrics. And we very much concur with what's happening out there, and in particular some very large and high-profile public-facing systems have helped to drive awareness in biometrics and also to drive comfort levels in the use of biometrics. A few interesting examples would be in the health club industry here in North America, for example. One of the largest providers in the fitness industry has been managing millions of members with their fingerprints for access to the gyms for around about 5 years now. And what this means is that people from all walks of life get to experience the convenience factor of biometrics for something as simple as walking into a gym. And I want to emphasize the convenience element because biometrics obviously is employed primarily for security, but equally there's a very, very large contingent or component of convenience that comes into the systems as well. And that's one example of how that's leveraged. Also, universities have been another good driver of the technology, and of course, in student populations, it's even more welcomed and accepted to use biometrics. It's seen to have a cool factor or a wow factor. And we've seen a lot of universities really leverage the technology very well within their student populations. Everything from managing the cafeteria, access and payments, to access to sports facilities or to classrooms and laboratories. Also, as Mark mentioned, smartphones have been a great driver to show people, general consumers, how biometric usage can be easily become a comfortable part of daily activities and daily transactions. And lastly, but also very important, the traditional use of biometrics in access control and time and attendance, something that's been pretty prevalent for the last 20 years specifically and has been growing steadily, has actually had an interesting acceleration, particularly in North America, within the last 18 to 24 months. So overall, this sums up as being a definite increase in both awareness and acceptance of biometrics. And what we're also seeing as another driver is the profile of decision makers. 10 to 15 years ago, security and IT decisions were made very much by different people. The two groups really didn't interact or overlap very much, but things are not like that anymore. Today, security devices are essentially IT or IP devices. They touch networks, and it's part of the same decision-making process. So the security drivers, in terms of how the systems are designed, become very, very different. And also, we have a newer generation of decision makers, tech-savvy generation that grew up with technology at their fingertips and have a naturally different expectation coming into the industry about what the technology could or should do for them. And then lastly, the unfortunate element of public safety and security, which obviously in different regions around the world is changing at different rates. But the reality is that the public safety threat of terrorism is a factor that drives organizations to concentrate more and more on providing secure workplaces for their employees, making sure that they have secure perimeters and can provide a safe and accountable environment for employees. So all of this together has really spurred on the need for frictionless security and access. So just very quickly, what does it actually mean to have frictionless security? It does differ depending on the actual customer or market, but essentially the principle is that you want to be able to maintain the desired level of security without impacting behavior of an individual through an access point, which means let somebody walk through without having to stop or dramatically change what they're doing in order to be successfully identified or authenticated. So this creates some very interesting challenges and good challenges that help to drive the evolution of the biometric industry. For example, you have to be able to cater for differences in speed of walking of different people. Everyone will walk at a different speed. You have to be able to cater for changes in direction, including sudden changes of direction. For example, if you have a bank of turnstiles and you have a group of 20 or 50 people walking towards those turnstiles, how do you deal with somebody who may suddenly change their mind or change direction just as they approach the entrance to the turnstile? Those are kinds of real-world factors that have to be accounted for when you design and build secure access systems. Also, the orientation and position of an individual is important to compensate or to handle. And how do you make sure that your system provides maximum matching accuracy irrespective of the height of the individual, where they may be looking or standing, or the direction that they're walking. And then lastly, the environmental factor as well. Most customers do not want to have to make substantial compromises in the design of their systems. Large corporates these days spend millions of dollars making sure that their lobbies are high class, very, very professionally finished off, and they don't want to have to manipulate lighting, for example, or put in intrusive looking technology just to have the right level of security. So the solutions have to blend very well with the architecture and not substantially change the environment. So apologies for the formatting on the slide. Something may have happened in the transfer of the files, but hopefully you can see the text here. Before we show a short video clip after this slide, a quick point about biometric processes. So two primary methodologies within biometrics. One is what we refer to as one-to-one. The other one is one-to-many or one-to-n. One-to-one means that you typically have to tell the biometric system who you claim to be before it will attempt to match your biometric. And that normally could happen by presenting a card or a token or some kind of identifier first. And then the system is only required to compare one set of records or one set of biometric data with your own. Frictionless security typically implies that you're going to perform a match based on biometric only, because you don't want to have to force people to stop and present some kind of token or present a PIN number, for example, an identifier. What that does mean is that if you're going to do frictionless access, you need to ensure that you use a very strong biometric and one that's going to be very reliable and repeatable as well. So what we'll do
I'm going to
here
take over here. I'll get the video going for you. Just bear with me a second.
No problem at all. Thank you. So the video clip will just show you a couple of scenarios of frictionless or contactless fingerprint in use, just to give you an idea of the speed of interaction with the technology. Apologies if there's any staggering on the video, just depending on the speed of your internet connection. Hopefully you'll get a good sense of the process of using contactless fingerprint. So the technology has evolved to a point where it's no longer where you have to be very careful or deliberate about touching a sensor, placing your fingers at a certain angle or with a certain degree of pressure. This is all about being able to wave your hand very fast without much concern for the angle or position of the fingers, without any compromise in terms of matching accuracy. In a wide variety of tests, the technology today has been regularly shown to be able to achieve throughputs in excess of 45 people per minute. And really all it comes down to is how comfortable people are in terms of how close they're willing to queue or stand behind each other or walk behind each other as they go through a point. So it really is a function of human behavior now, and also how willing people are to be able to go through at a particular speed. And we can scroll back to the presentation there, please.
All right, I'm doing that now.
So again, depending on the nature of the gate, for example, if it's a more traditional, mechanical turnstile that you might have had 10 or 15 years ago, that may now become, something that interrupts the flow of these systems. The technology on the biometric side is really able to accommodate people at a normal, or in fact a very brisk walking pace. So just to explain how we're able to achieve that today, and what we do from a biometric sensor technology to have this kind of speed. So for those of you who are familiar with traditional fingerprint systems, you'll know that you're required to present your finger onto a platen or a sensor. What that does is it creates some uniformity because you're pressing up against a flat surface, and that creates a spread of the fingerprint, and it creates some consistency and uniformity when you're comparing one mat or one sample from the next. Now, the advantage of a fingerprint is that it is a three-dimensional object. So our fingers all have a shape, and that shape has some advantages. And the great thing about the way that sensor technology is evolving is that we can now record very accurately not only the fingerprint information itself, but also the three-dimensional shape. Now, why that's beneficial is that we can do a number of things. First of all, we can determine the position and orientation of the finger in space. And that's important because if you can imagine any three-dimensional object, if you look at it with a two-dimensional view, depending on the orientation of the object, you may have a completely different idea about the size or length of that object. And for example, if you're looking at the comparison between 2 points on that surface, depending on how it's positioned, if you don't have the three-dimensional perspective, you may misinterpret the shape and the features of that object. So the ability to use three-dimensional scanning within this technology means that we can get a much more accurate recording of the entire fingerprint surface. And in the illustration below here, you will see where I'm hovering the mouse right now, on the left-hand side, you see a typical area of a traditional fingerprint scanner. On the far right, you'll see what's typically used in forensics or law enforcement, where you have a full nail-to-nail rolled impression. With touchless technology today, you can get substantially more than traditional contact acquisitions, and you can get almost as much as you would on a full nail-to-nail rolled capture. And what that means is that we have far more characteristic points or minutiae acquired with every scan of the print. And that allows for much higher levels of matching accuracy. It means that you can afford to tune your matching threshold higher than you would on a traditional contact-based technology and not have an adverse effect on false rejection rates. In other words, you can tune for higher security and not negatively affect the convenience value for the customer or for the users. Another really critical part, and I think this is something that has become much more important in recent years, is the way in which biometric systems, security systems are architected. Good systems will be designed in such a way that they respect data storage or data privacy in the way they're designed and in the way they handle biometric data. So as an example, and the same really applies, for if you were deploying an iris system as well, But good systems today will not need to store raw biometric data. The way most technologies work today is they extract the unique features from the biometric, and in this case I'll use the fingerprint as an example. So the unique features being the minutia points, for example, we extract that data, we can composite them from various acquisitions, and that's another advantage of touchless technology, is that as the hand waves through the scanning area, each fingerprint is seen multiple times, and it allows us to get many perspectives of the same finger and build a composite from the various frames. And that allows for a much more complete template to be built. And the template that we're referring to here is just the final file, which is really nothing more than a binary mathematical representation of the biometric. It is not the raw biometric. And the reason I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on this particular slide was one of the primary reasons that some biometric deployments have failed in the past is because they did not respect this approach. And if you don't design the system accordingly, you definitely will get a much higher degree of pushback and lack of buy-in from the actual users who need to interact with the system on a daily basis. So some important additional points about contactless technology, in particular contactless fingerprint. I mentioned earlier that you can, during the process of waving a hand through the sensor, we scan all fingers, all 4 fingers, and we're able to actually see each of those multiple times through the different frames. And the nice thing is that it allows users to wave the hand in any direction, left or right, and at a very, very high speed. So that means that people do not actually have to stop in order to transact through the actual gate or access point. Also, we touched on the fact that there is more data that's acquired for every single print, but also the benefit of using the hand is that there are 4 different fingerprints on each hand, and you might think, what about the thumbs? The thumbs are not actually needed because of their orientation on the hand. So typically one would use the 4 fingers. But each fingerprint on your hand is completely unique and different from the other. So walking around and waving a single hand is like exposing 4 unique credentials to the system. So that's a very, very powerful tool, and a lot of customers that we see today are actually leveraging that fact by accepting that each fingerprint on its own is unique and therefore can be considered as an additional factor. So it's another way of strengthening security if you want to enforce that more than 1 fingerprint on any given hand is matched at a time. The other benefit of contactless technologies is that you don't have to concern yourself with some of the more traditional problems around wet or dry hands or wet or dry skin because you're not making contact with the sensor. At the same time, some of the traditional systems, for anybody who's ever been through a border control point, you might have seen that some people struggle with different degrees of pressure that have to be applied on a sensor depending on the nature of any given person's skin. Again, the contactless approach takes away some of those constraints because the pressure is no longer needed because of the mode of operation. Another great side effect of that is that there are no latent prints or ghost images that are left on the sensor because of the lack of need to actually make contact with the sensor surface. This next point is is an often overlooked one, but a very critical one to highlight. Deliberate action and proximity required. What does that mean? So, any time that a market evolves and new solutions come up, with every positive advancement, there are always some interesting challenges that get introduced as well. So we have seen that in certain types of contactless technologies, some of them are inherently perceived as being covert, in that there is no way for a user to know precisely when they're being scanned. The advantage of a contactless fingerprint solution is that you can ensure users that they're only scanned when they deliberately interact with the solution. In other words, when they wave their hands through the sensing area, they know that that's the actual time in which they're being authenticated. The other benefit of that is that you have a much more precise indicator as to when you need to trigger the actual access point. As I mentioned earlier, if you look at a deployment, let's say in a large corporate lobby, where you might have during peak hours hundreds of people entering at a time through a bank of maybe 15 or 20 turnstiles, if you don't have a very precise determinator or decision point when to open that turnstile, there is the possibility of allowing the wrong person through the access point. So having a frictionless access control biometric that still assures the right degree of proximity of a user allows you to make a stronger determination as to when to actually open the door or the gate. I touched on this earlier. The other point as well about this kind of technology is that it is immune to external lighting. So it has its own light sources in a controlled area, and therefore it doesn't require what we refer to as environmental engineering. You don't have to affect the environment in which you install the technology. And then lastly, I think you will see that across the biometric industry today, vendors, when they produce these new technologies, they are made available in such a way that they can easily plug in to existing security systems. The benefit there is that most companies have invested a lot of time and energy configuring their legacy or existing access control systems, whether they're using cards or pin pads or whatever it is to control current doors. Normally in any large corporation, a lot of work has gone into designing and configuring the layout, creating zones and rules as to who's allowed in which particular points. And these biometric devices today allow you to simply plug into those existing systems and leverage the effort that you've already spent on those systems without having to discard anything. And essentially what you're doing is you're not only extending the lifespan of an existing deployment, but you're also at the same time strengthening the security at any given point. So just to wrap up quickly, where we've seen applications, particularly in the last 18 to 24 months, a very high degree of usage for this kind of technology in the financial sector. In that sector, you have both large numbers of users in corporate buildings where you have extreme peaks of traffic in the early mornings and in the evenings. And this is a great way to optimize floor space and get more people through the same area in a much, much shorter time. So you're shortening queues, you're increasing productivity because people get to their desks sooner, and overall many of these big deployments that have been implemented in the last 18 months have gone through some very rigorous user acceptance tests. And more so than ever before in this space, we've seen very dramatic increases in user feedback. It's not just a matter of users accepting the technology, but it's now at the point where users actually love using it. They enjoy using the technology because it's so innovative and so convenient. And equally, we've seen very, very great adoption in the education sector as well as critical infrastructure because of the importance of protecting those sensitive sites. So with that, let me end there so we can ensure we allow some time for questions. I do want to thank you again for being on the session today.
Great, thanks, Gary. I do have some questions here from the audience. Let me start with this one, and this is posed, to both of you can answer this. Why would people choose iris scanning over another type of biometric identifier?
If I could answer.
Yeah, you want to start?
Well, I think one, it's the security level that you get out of an iris capability, and also iris is a protected biometric, and a lot of times your fingers and your hands aren't. If you're a construction worker, you might not have fingerprints. If if you work with your hands, they sometimes can be degraded, and it can be difficult to use a fingerprint. It just depends on the individual. And I know that some elderly people using fingerprints, sometimes their skin gets a little too thin and doesn't work very well. Where your iris is always there. It's just a picture of your eye that we're taking. You might consider that it's very secure and it's protected. And as long as it's easy to use, it should be an equivalent biometric to any kind of fingerprint solution or hand system solution.
And I'd like to add just onto to that comment there as well. Anyone that's been watching this industry, especially in the last 2 decades, will know that it has been a wild west. There have been a lot of companies come and go, and a lot of these technologies have led to some very unfortunate perceptions about what can be done. And again, I think that it really does come down to selecting the right solution, looking at the benchmarks to see what can be done, because after all, you've got great examples in worldwide government agencies that rely on all 3 modalities, fingerprint, face, and iris, for mission-critical applications. It's more a function of choosing a credible vendor, because any of those modalities can be configured to work successfully, provided the design is good.
Okay, good. And I have some other questions. Let's get a few more in here. We have a question here. How accurate is scanning an iris versus fingerprint?
Well, in my opinion, I'm not sure it's the accuracy of the scanning. It depends obviously on the users and whether they use things correctly. And the iris situation in our walkthrough systems and things like that, the requirement is we have to be able to see your eyes to take the picture. And that can be user behavior. If you're in the bright sunlight and people are squinting, you may have a hard time getting somebody's iris, where you may be able to get their fingerprints perfectly well in a sunlight condition. So it depends to some extent. From the iris perspective, you have to have your eyes open.
I think also just to add on there, fully concur with that reply. And then again, if you're looking at either an iris or a fingerprint system, what we commonly know that if you're looking at a top-end vendor, you should be able to expect at least 10-5 to 10-6, again, 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million false acceptance rate on the high security side. And again, the thing that might be affected would be false rejection, depending on the environmental conditions. But operational false acceptances today are in that range of 10-5 to 10-6.
Okay, and Gary, I'll let you answer this question first. Can your biometric products integrate into existing systems, or do I need to start over? That's what one of the attendees is asking. And Mark, you could respond as well, but Gary, if you want to go first.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So again, most good good technologies today on the biometric side are designed with all of the right interfaces to allow them to communicate with even legacy access control systems that might be 20 years old or more. Most access control systems rely on a Wiegand interface or RS-485, and systems today typically will cater for most of the legacy interfaces as well as the newer ones, so you can just hook them right into your existing security systems.
I concur. From the iris systems, it's integrated into legacy access control systems, Wiegand, legacy protocols, as well as more modern IP related protocols. So yeah, the integration with existing systems should not be a big deal.
Okay, great. And I think we have time for one more question. I saw a couple of these. What is the difference between retina and iris scanning?
So the retina scanning is actually a very fairly intrusive looking at the back of your eye. It's actually looking at the vein patterns at the back of your eye. So it actually looks through the pupil to the back of your eye. An iris scan is simply a picture of your eye. So think of a picture of your face for facial recognition and a picture of your eye for iris recognition.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I want to thank you both, Mark and Gary. Great job. Thank you for explaining everything to us. It's a very interesting technology, and there's great potential in the future. I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to let everyone know that this webcast will be available to watch on demand as of tomorrow morning, so we can come back and go through it again if you like. Once again, thank you, everyone.